Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. The Mandalorians, ever since the expanded universe days, have always had a shiny object as a symbol for leadership, and that's because the Mandalorians were a simple group of people who enjoyed raiding, pillaging, crushing the skulls of their enemies, and the lamentation of their women. And so such rudimentary symbols were necessary as a physical manifestation of leadership. This is perhaps because the early Mandalorians were not capable of abstract thought.
Wave that thing around, and they'll do whatever you say.
Bo-katan, of course, is talking about Djarin's member, which is also known as the Darksaber. And before the Darksaber existed, back in legendary times, the Mandalorians had a mask, which apparently could be traced directly to Mandalore I, the Twang warrior who first led these warrior people to Mandalore in the first place. Mandalore's mask would change hands from ruler to ruler. Sometimes the mask would be recovered from dead Mandalores, and then other times you had duels being fought over ownership of this mask. But then the fallen Jedi Revan would defeat Mandalore the Ultimate in one-on-one combat. Revan was sort of falling towards the dark side at this point, so he pulls a really dickhead move and he just hides this mask. And so no Mandalorian can find it or claim, ownership of the throne. Basically, what happens to Bo-Katan's army happens to Mandalorian society.
When I returned without the Darksaber, my forces melted away.
Mandalore's mask was like the Darksaber, is the only thing that could really unite Mandalorian society, and without it, the Neo-Crusades collapsed, the Mandalorians broke up into small little clans, and they continued living their nomadic ways and basically became armed guns for hire. Now, the tradition of the Darksaber is quite similar to the tradition of Mandalore's mask. Whoever is the rightful owner of the Darksaber has the right to claim themselves as Mandalore, the leader of the Mandalorian people. There was one difference between these two objects, though. Mandalore's mask, you just basically had to own. It didn't matter how you got it. Mandalore the Ultimate, for instance, found the mask on Onderon after Mandalore the Indomitable was killed by wild animals. The Darksaber, however, couldn't just be, picked up or given. It had to be won in combat, similar to like the honor duels that dictate who rules Wakanda. Unpopular opinion, guys, the second Black Panther I thought was better than the first one. Chadwick Boseman was clear charisma, rest in peace. But Letitia Wright, she's the real deal, guys. Her acting skills are off the chart. Needless to say, having this type of tradition and system in place guarantees that you'll always have talented fighters leading your nation into disaster. And that's basically what happens to the Mandalorians. I mean, there's no correlation between being a talented fighter and a talented leader. The only people who think that are like 5-year-olds who like Vikings and barbarians. So let's take a look at the Darksaber and follow its path through history, and take a look at the individuals who have fought for it and ultimately claimed the weapon and the people for themselves. In many ways, the history of the Darksaber is the history of the Mandalorians. So it all starts out with Vizsla. He was the first Mandalorian ever to be inducted into the Jedi Order. He was considered a great Jedi Knight, and he left the Order eventually to found House Vizsla. He would unite the various Mandalorian clans together and become Mandalore, or ruler of his people. After his death, the Darksaber would be returned to the Jedi Temple, and then roughly around 1,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, during a period of instability, Clan Vizsla, who created Death Watch, they're just Clan Vizsla at this point, would attack the Jedi Temple and steal the Darksaber and bring it back to their own people. The next time we see this weapon is in 21 BBY during the Clone Wars, and it's found in the hands of Pre Vizsla, a direct descendant of Tar. Pre Vizsla is the leader of that organization I was talking about, Death Watch. And this group was all about restoring Mandalore's legacy and reclaiming their past culture and traditions. Although Death Watch's numbers were quite small and they had just recently lost a civil war to the new Mandalorian faction, the fact that Pre Vizsla possessed this blade was still a huge political factor. But then again, the chances of Death Watch taking over Mandalore was very slight because the new Mandalorians simply outnumbered them, and Sentient Cries, for better or worse, was improving the economic conditions on Mandalore for the first time in history, probably. The new Mandalorians under Sentient Cries was all about that economic and social development. She wanted to turn this race of nomadic warriors into a true civilization that wouldn't be interrupted every 10 years by a massive, devastating war which would destroy the surface of the planet. And so Pre Vizsla kinda knew that the sword alone would not win him Mandalore. If anything, Mandalorian culture and traditions were on the verge of dying because of the new Mandalorians. But there was one thing that the Mandalorian people were susceptible to, and it wasn't high food and energy prices, which they were facing during the Clone Wars. It was actually just a lack of security. It's something that most sentient beings really care about more than anything. And so Pre Vizsla exploits the weaknesses of the new Mandalorians by making an unholy alliance with Maul and his Shadow Collective, a collection of hand-curated criminal organizations that are sure to reduce the property value of any neighborhood once they're transported there. Once the criminals arrive in Mandalore, they, I don't know, start eating babies and dumping spice into the water or whatever one does when criminaling. Death Watch then swoops in like vigilantes and saves the day. Suddenly, they're everyone's favorites. Now, keep in mind, guys, Death Watch lost that civil war against the new Mandalorians, and the new Mandalorians, while they're most likely the better faction to support in this war, has been filling their society full of propaganda against the Death Watch. A lot of this was true, by the way. I mean, this was a pretty regressive organization. But my point is, Death Watch was seen as terrorists, criminals, thugs, and all sorts of other terrible things you would call a group of people who are your people, but you just have a major political difference with them. Think about how the Dems and the Republicans like insulting each other. It's kind of like that. Yet despite all of this, the new Mandalorians welcome Death Watch with open arms, because safety is numero uno. This is actually a really important political lesson that I think a lot of people who are interested in politics can learn. And I think, in all fairness, the Democrats probably learned a few years back when they f***ed up all of our major cities, including my beloved New York, by attacking the police and trying to defund them. I mean, seriously, this became an issue. Like, the deodorant in my convenience store was gone simply because a guy would come every day and just steal them and then sell them on the streets. And so, instead of calling the police, which they really couldn't in this case, the store just stopped carrying deodorant. Like, what the hell, man? It's stuff like this that turns lifelong liberals into hardcore Republicans really quickly. I mean, guys, come on. We should commend people for caring about racial injustice and wanting police reform, but that goes out the window the second a guy breaks into your house and takes a dump on your floor. There's a hierarchy of needs here. See, the Clone Wars is full of amazing lessons on civics and politics. You just have to be willing to look for them. Now, the new Mandalorians' inability to protect their own people led to the rise of Death Watch's reign over the planet, which hardly is ideal. I mean, Death Watch was pretty toxic. They just liked killing things. They didn't really have a goal. They didn't have policy or talking points, which is why it's so scary that they took over in the first place. That's how bad the new Mandalorians have been doing. Pre Vizsla was also kind of an idiot and thought he could use Maul to his advantage and then discard him the second he gains access to the throne. Instead, what happens is Maul confronts Pre Vizsla and challenges him to a duel for the Darksaber, an offer that Pre Vizsla cannot refuse because tradition. Maul, who's probably one of the top 10 duelists in the galaxy at this point, easily defeats Pre Vizsla after all of his little tricks and go-go gadgets are used up. Suddenly, Pre Vizsla is headless, and Mandalore is being ruled by an outsider, a former Sith assassin Zabrak named Maul. Bo-katan is horrified by the fact that the ruler of the Mandalorians is now non-Mandalorian. And so she leaves. Not only is Bo-katan probably slightly racist here, she also understands that Maul does not give a crap about Mandalorian tradition and is just using the organization as a means to get what he wants. Now, unfortunately for Maul, Darth Sidious chooses this moment to revisit his former apprentice and finds him plotting against him with his brother Savage Opress. Darth Sidious proceeds to throw Maul around like a rag doll and kills his brother. At one point, Darth Sidious actually gets a hold of the Darksaber, but he doesn't want it. This is, by the way, why a physical symbol for leadership is really dumb. It makes it a lot easier for your enemies to just kind of steal it and then take over your people, instead of going through the usual, what they call it, the hearts and minds approach, which we used in Vietnam, Iraq, Canada, and Afghanistan. I mean, imagine how much easier it would have been for the United States to install a pro-Western government in Afghanistan if all you needed was like some golden AK-47 that was the symbol of leadership. Decentralize your political power, guys. Don't put it into an object. It's so dumb. Then decades later, during the time of the Empire, it's revealed that Maul still has the Darksaber on Dathomir. Several rebels, including Ezra Bridger, Mandalorian Sabine Wren, travel to Dathomir and recover it. Sabine gets possessed by ancient Dathomiri spirits and takes the Darksaber and begins attacking Ezra with it. Ezra manages to free her from the grips of the spirits. He borrows the Darksaber and ends up destroying the witch's altar. Sabine ends up leaving with the Darksaber. She would be advised by other Mandalorians like Protector Fen-Ra on what she should do with the weapon. All of her friends hope that she can one day become a great leader for her people. But Sabine Wren, no, she has different ideas. If you couldn't tell by her spray-painted armor, She's anti-establishment. And so she returns home to Crow Nest with the weapon, which is where her clan, Wren, was located. Sabine Wren would hand over the Darksaber to his mother Ursa, a former Night Owl who had fought alongside bo-katan Kryzer in the Clone Wars. But things don't play out the way Sabine expects them to. First, her mother denies her claim on the saber because she didn't fight Maul, and then to make matters worse, Ursa tries to trade the Darksaber in exchange for her safety to Gar Saxon. Gar Saxon was the governor of Mandalore, but what he actually was an Imperial collaborator. But Saxon then surprises Clan Wren by ordering his men to massacre all of them. A fight ensues and Sabine Wren ends up fighting Gar Saxon, who is now wielding the Darksaber. Sabine ends up disarming him and rightfully wins a claim on the Darksaber, and the problem is solved. Except it isn't, and that's because not only does Sabine Wren have really colorful armor, she's also dyed her hair, so she's extra anti-establishment. And so she meets up with bo-katan Kryze, the former Death Watch warrior, sister to Satine Kryze, former Duchess of Mandalore. Bo-katan wants the leadership position, or perhaps she just wants to right the many wrongs she's committed in her past as a Death Watch soldier. And so she receives the Darksaber. The problem here is bo-katan is given the weapon, she does not win it, which is a no-no according to tradition, if you believe in that kind of thing. And although bo-katan and the rebels manage to free their world from Imperial rule, shortly after Moff Gideon arrives with a gigantic fleet and carries out the Great Purge of Mandalore in the process. He also wins the Darksaber from bo-katan and kicks her off of her planet. Organizations like the Children of the Watch will claim that this happened because bo-katan did not follow the proper procedure to basically, get the Darksaber, completely ignoring the fact that Mandalore is one planet and they went up against the entire Empire. Now, Moff Gideon gets involved in some creepy child kidnapping nonsense and accidentally targets a little baby Yoda thing called Gogurt. Yum. And that actually draws the ire of a Mandalorian single father named Djarin. Djarin ends up dueling Moff Gideon with his Beskar spear and manages to disarm the ISB officer. By doing this, Djarin now has become the owner of the Darksaber, a responsibility that he also doesn't want. And so he tries to give bo-katan the saber, but she refuses this time because of what happened last time. Someone gave her that weapon freely. You see, she's learned. Others would try to attack Djarin for the Darksaber, including Paz Vizsla, but for now, Djarin, as reluctant as he is the rightful owner of the Darksaber and therefore has a claim on the Mandalorian throne. The only problem is he belongs to that very extreme sect known as the Children of the Watch. And because he took his helmet off in front of Bill Burr and a few other Imperial officers, he's now exiled and no longer considered a Mandalorian. This weapon is nothing but trouble, and in the third season of Mandalorian, we'll finally figure out what happens. Will, Djarin, bo-katan unite their people and bring them together once again? I mean, I personally really hope that they just get rid of the Darksaber completely. I know it's one of the coolest lightsaber designs ever. I'll definitely give you that, but it's so stupid. It's so stupid to make a weapon the symbol of leadership. It doesn't make any sense. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Let me know in the comment section below what you guys think. Am I wrong? I'm sure a lot of you guys might think I am. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below as well so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, the democracy.